But first, in the United States, a deal on the country's debt ceiling took a step closer last night, clearing its first procedural hurdle. That was despite a revolt from hardline conservatives. Well, tonight it goes to a vote, a make or break vote on the deal. Without agreement, the US would hit its borrowing limit on Monday. That would mean defaulting on its $31.4 trillion worth of debt. In turn, that could mean federal and military workers would stop being paid and the economy could fall into chaos. Let's speak now to Jordan Weissman, who is the Washington editor of the political newsletter Semaphore. Jordan, thanks for being with us. So last night, that deal cleared a major hurdle, but the real test comes tonight, doesn't it?
It does, but it's looking pretty good for the bill. I think the consensus in Washington right now is that, there are some last minute procedural fights going on, but most people believe this is probably going to pass.
Have the numbers to do that, and we heard those clips in the headline. This is not a perfect deal, but it is the one that is most palatable. Just remind us of some of these compromises, because there are compromises on both sides.
Right. So this was a pretty epic clash, or it seemed like it was going to be. Republicans went into this fight, passing a party line bill that essentially demanded that Joe Biden make massive cuts to the annual budget and, repeal his signature climate legislation, among other things, things that were almost certainly never going to fly with, Democrats in the Senate or with the White House. Joe Biden said he wasn't going to negotiate at all. He was, accusing the Republicans of using hostage tactics and saying the whole thing was illegitimate and that they should just pass a clean debt ceiling hike. In the end, what seems to have happened is the two sides came together. They did negotiate. And what you got was sort of a normal budget deal. It was a little bit better than what you would ordinarily expect, the party out of power to get in a budget negotiation, but it wasn't far off from the norm. And so, you're getting a temporary freeze on certain kinds of federal spending. The White House accepted that it was going to have to cut some investment in the IRS, in our tax authority, that it had passed, which had been a big deal. And there's some new work requirements on one of our major safety net programs. But again, this stuff isn't, apocalyptic, let's put it that way. And Democrats are mostly willing to swallow it.
Yeah, willing to swallow it. Of course, the big question is, can they do so before that deadline? We know the so-called X date, the date when the US would run out of money, has been pushed back slightly, but not by much, until Monday. Assuming a deal is done tonight, is that enough time to do all of the paperwork that's required?
I think yes. Again, there are always last minute hiccups that can come up. But even in the Senate, it seems like they're preparing to try and move through this pretty quickly. It doesn't look like anyone's going to delay the process just to give us reporters something to write about.
And always when we talk about these sorts of things, it's the big question, isn't it, whether it's about economics and spending or it's just about the politics. And what it does is throw the spotlight onto maybe some of that fragmentation. What does it tell us about the rather frayed relations right now in the House amongst Republicans, that they can't come to any sort of consensus on whether this deal is a good one or not?
Well, I would say they're maybe a little bit less fractured than it might look at first glance. Yeah, there is a hardline contingent in the House of Representatives. They go by the House Freedom Caucus that really, they wanted everything. They wanted the original party line bill that they passed. They wanted the moon, some people would say, and they have not been really willing to compromise. But, it looks like the majority of House Republicans are going to go along with this bill. They are willing to, take half a loaf here because it should yield some substantial budget savings. And, they're relatively happy with what Speaker McCarthy has given them. But at the same time, yes, some of the hardliners have been, denouncing this legislation as a betrayal, and some have even murmured a little bit about trying to oust McCarthy, although talk of that has died down pretty quickly as well.
Yeah, I mean, the mood music is good. The markets are pretty calm. They're expecting a deal will be done. But we know that this showdown has lasted months. There have been weeks of painstaking negotiations. I wonder if this deal doesn't go through, is there any sort of wiggle room? Where is the negotiation and the compromise coming from?
Well, if the deal were to collapse at the last minute for some reason, I think everyone agrees that would be rather bad. I'm not sure there's a plan B at this point, other than the White House maybe trying some unilateral action that people have talked about, like invoking the 14th Amendment and ruling, saying that the debt ceiling is just unconstitutional. But yeah, I hesitate to worry too much about that. Although I do realize that it's got to be really unpleasant, as a global audience, to essentially watch the United States have, a budget negotiation that could, accidentally blow up the entire global economy if something just kind of goes wrong at the last minute. I understand the fear, but it seems like things are headed in the right direction.
Yes, given what's at stake, let's hope so. Jordan, really good to have you with us. Jordan Weissman there, Washington editor of the political newsletter Semaphore. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.